Welcome to Compelling Conversations, where law meets business. With your host, Dara Rosenbaum, founding partner and attorney at Rosenbaum & Taylor in New York. You can watch episodes on YouTube and listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. For prior episodes and free resources, go to www.rosenbaumtaylor.com/learn. Now here's the host of Compelling Conversations, Dara Rosenbaum.
Hello and welcome to Compelling Conversations. I am joined today by Angela Gennari, who is the Chief Visionary Officer for Titan Global Enterprises. By the way, my first CVO on the podcast.
Yeah. Good.
Titan Global Enterprises is a company that Angela founded in 2015 with only $500. We'll talk about that. And a vision for how to improve the events industry by making hospitality the primary focus of all staff positions within an event or venue. As a serial entrepreneur with 20 years of hospitality experience, Angela has founded multiple companies within the events and meeting industry. Her passion for great service, coupled with a desire to inspire and motivate teams, has enabled her to build a company that has grown exponentially and organically while challenging the status quo. Titan, a leading security and event staffing company based in Georgia, has a culture of teamwork and dedication, and in only 7 years has earned the trust and loyalty of notable clients like the University of Georgia, Gas South Arena, the Atlanta Open, State Farm Arena, and more. Angela is also the host of Pretty Powerful Podcast, a platform to celebrate and learn from exceptional women who are breaking barriers, shattering glass ceilings, and rising to the top of their industry. So welcome, Angela. We have so much to dive into just based on that intro.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So the first question is, how do you start a company with $500?
Well, it wasn't the plan. So I knew I wanted to start this business, and I thought, I want to do this right. I've started a few businesses before that, and I've always bootstrapped my businesses, and I feel like it's a good way to really kind of get your priorities in order, right? Because when you're bootstrapping, you really do prioritize. And so I said, I want to start it with, I saved up $5,000 and I was ready to go. I wanted to hire a graphic designer, get the corporation set up correctly. And then my air conditioner went out in my house. So I was left with $500 after paying $4,500 for that. So I had $500 and had to teach myself, because at that point I couldn't hire anyone to help me. So I taught myself how to design a website. I put together a website. I had a logo designed on Fiverr. I had, I just kind of pulled together the most, the resources that I could afford at the time to maximize my $500. And I just took on most of the tasks myself. And so I ended up starting it with $500. And then for the first couple of, we had our first event after a few months, and I just kept reinvesting back into the business. So that's kind of how I got started, and didn't really take a salary for the first couple of years of the business, as I just reinvested back in constantly.
So one of those things, like the best laid plans, you had $5,000 all ready to go and it needed to go elsewhere.
That's right. So, I think it taught, I always say obstacles are character building. So, it taught me a little bit more tenacity. I've always been, somebody who's pretty dedicated to doing what I say I'm going to do. So it just taught me to be creative and figure it out. So.
And what kind of lessons do you think you learned from starting that company with just that kind of budget?
I really had to prioritize and figure out, what can I do to earn money now, right? So the very first thing that we did, or I did, it was just me. I say we now, but at the time it was me. I was the recruiter, trainer, bookkeeper, janitor. I was everything. And so at that time, my business philosophy became say yes and figure it out. And so because I couldn't turn down money, so the opportunity to make money, whatever that looked like, I had to say yes and figure it out. So I remember a couple times I had been called by people to do meeting management and travel management, which is what I had done for a long time prior to that. So I was happy to do it, jump on board and do meeting and travel management. And then, I was looking through like government websites like, sam.gov for opportunities where I could, do some meeting planning and travel accommodations for the government, because that's kind of what I had done previously. So I did that just to earn a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
Then I get a call from a caterer who says, hey, I heard you're doing staffing, which, at the time it was in the blast email that I sent out, but I had 0 staff. And so I was
you.
Yeah. And so I said, yeah, we'll do hospitality staffing also. And so I get a call from a caterer and he says, I have a huge event this weekend and I need 10 banquet servers. Can you do it? And I said, oh, absolutely. And when I hung up the phone, I'm in the middle of making dinner. And, my son looks at me and he says, what was that? And I was like, oh, I just booked an event. And he was like, but you don't have any employees. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's the next part I'm going to figure out. And so I had 4 days to find, hire, and train 10 banquet servers. And I did it. And so it ended up being really good. By that, I actually got to the event and the caterer says to me, okay, well, you can go home now. And I'm like, well, maybe I should stay and just make sure everybody does a good job. And he's like, nope, we're good. And I'm like panicking the whole time thinking, oh my God, are they going to do what I asked them to do? Are they going to listen to the training I provided? And sure enough, Monday he calls me. He's like, that was the best staff I've ever worked with. When can we do it again? And
wow.
I was like, and so
that's fantastic.
So that kind of started off the staffing component. And then we just continued to get more referrals from that, which, allowed us to build the business. So each time we got a referral for something different, State Farm Arena called us and said, hey, we would love you guys to come in and help us with our conversions. We've been told that if we need to fix our staffing issues, we should call Titan. Now we have been in business for about 6 months. And I'm driving when I'm getting this call. I pull over and I'm Googling, what is a conversion?
Okay, that was going to be my question to you, because I've never heard of that in that context.
It's essentially a huge setup and strike, right? So when you set up an event and you strike it, except you're doing an entire arena, right? So you're striking.
Strike meaning take it down.
Basketball floor. And you're building the Elton John stage, and so it's a huge setup and strike. So it's a conversion is where you convert an arena from one use to another, which I found out as I was Googling it, and went down and I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to come down. I'll bring my management team and we'll come down and check it out. And, we watched a conversion. So my meeting planning background, I'm very operations and logistics focused. So, we just wrote down like what is happening and how we can create efficiencies and create alignment in what they were doing. And so I came back to them with a plan and I said, well, this is what it is. This is how we can fix your conversions. And they said, oh, no, that's way too expensive. And I said, okay, well, that's what it costs, And so I had to walk away, and it was nerve-wracking because, again, this is a huge client. It would be a huge win for us to have it. But I also knew what it would take to change the process. You can't do what you what you've always been doing and expect different results. And they were kind of thinking, oh, we're just going to bring in another staffing agency and they'll fix everything. But the problem is if you bring in another staffing agency and you continue to pay them low, or, you don't set a standard, you're not going to get different results. Right. So I told him, he said, well, you're, significantly higher than every other temp agency we've ever used. And I said, well, that's fine. We're not a temp agency, but if you want to keep using temp agencies, then do that and you'll keep getting the same results. And so anyway, they've been our client now for 7 years.
Very nice. Very nice. So at that point in time, you said you brought your management team. Did you have a management team at that time?
I had a couple of people that were really great staff. We didn't have enough events to really have a management team. We were still pretty small. So I had people that I really trusted that I had hired on. And then, we weren't doing events large enough to have supervisors and managers. But they were part-time, and there were people that if I needed something, I knew I could go to and say, hey, can you handle this aspect? And so after that, I did make them managers, and they were managers of that account. So yes, I love
the idea of find a management team. I have to find a management team.
I'm going to go find a management team, and then I'm going to bring them to your venue. Yes. So, once again, say yes and figure it out, because,
I love that.
you're just trying to start out and you're bootstrapping, you let the market tell you what you're going to provide. You don't necessarily, you can have the best intentions of saying, I'm going to do this better than anyone. But if the market doesn't want that, it is, you've got to follow the money sometimes.
And there's a good lesson there, because I think that sometimes the market's going to know what it needs.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It might not be what you decided to send out in the email blast. It might be slightly different, or somebody may see the email blast and think you can do something that maybe you weren't ready to do, but you say yes and figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Google is our friend.
Yes. Mostly.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Mostly, if you need a little discerning when you read it. Yeah. So how big has the company gotten? Like what kind of growth have you had in the last 7 years?
We started out with just me and about 5 or 6, part-time people. And now we're up to we've got about 490 employees at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. So most are part-time variable hour. We do have quite a few that are full-time. But yeah, so about 490, and we work, all throughout Georgia in different capacities. So we now at this point, we staff every position in any event or venue. So we have the capacity to do anything from just ushers for an award show all the way through, field staff for a, SEC football game. So, and then we also do conferences, conventions. So it's, a lot of the stuff, it's the events industry. So you're really busy one week, you're kind of slow the next week, you're really busy the next week. So full time is pretty tough, but we're trying to get more consistent. We do have multiple events going on every day. So that does help.
And you said okay, so award ceremonies, SEC football games, what are the kind of things you guys doing?
We do a lot of conventions and conferences. So when a conference or convention comes to Atlanta, usually Georgia World Congress Center, we will set up, whether it's whatever it is that they need, whether it's greeters, badge scanners, security personnel, equipment watch. We're a licensed security agency, so we can do, equipment watches, access control. Or they might just need registration help, some guest services type of role. So we have staff for all of those different roles. And then, at State Farm, we're doing conversion. So every time there's a big concert there, followed by a basketball game, followed by Disney on Ice, we can convert the arena. And so we do that for several different venues now. We don't just do it for them. We do it for a few others as well. And then, we're also doing security for, we just did a security for an award show. It was a Nigerian award show that took place here in Atlanta. So that was a lot of fun. And this week we're getting ready for another award show.
So how have you grown the company from one, just one person to 490 full-time and part-time employees? Like, what does that 7 years look like?
Oh gosh, it's a lot of grit, a lot of grit.
Yeah.
We have actually been in a fortunate place where we haven't done a lot of outreach. Almost all of our clients have come to us, through a referral or through, hearing about us and saying, hey, you know what, I hear Titan's, a great place to go to have some, great staff. I am a member. I'm a pretty active member of some associations. So like our security association, as well as convention and visitors bureaus and so forth. I do have a decent amount of contacts, that I've networked with through the past 20 years in the events industry. So that has helped also. So I think it's, I have taken on more the sales role in the company for the past several years, and through relationship building and just continuing to just kind of reach out and build those contacts. I think that has really helped. We haven't done any advertising. I think once or twice we've done a print ad or, a few Google ads, but nothing significant.
Wow, that's incredible. The referrals obviously speak volumes about the quality of the work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's our biggest source of pride is that, most of the clients that have come to us, we've doubled revenue every year for for 5 years. And then this thing called a pandemic hit. And when your entire
the events,
when your entire business model focuses around large venues and large events.
And in-person events, because obviously there's not a lot of need for security or things like that when you're doing Zoom.
Nope, unfortunately not. So, we didn't pivot in time to really kind of be set up to do anything other than large events.
Right.
So, the large events were really our forte. And, thankfully, I tell you, the timing was great because we had just come off of a great year, and was kind of getting onto my accountant. I'm like, why do I have to pay so much in taxes? This is crazy. Like, why didn't we find more loopholes? Why didn't we like? Is there not more deductions we can take? And he's like, Angela, it's never a bad idea to have money sitting in the bank. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, would you rather spend $1 to save 30 cents and sending it to the government? I was like, well, yes. He's like, just trust me, having money in the bank is going to be okay. And not even a few weeks after that conversation, the pandemic hit, and he was like, now, aren't you glad you have money in the bank? And I said, yeah.
Yep, good point.
So
Very good.
So we were able to get through the 5 months. We just kind of pulled back on, anything that wasn't essential operations. We had to furlough our part-time employees and kept our office staff so that we could, continue to just maintain the business. And for 5 months, we just kind of didn't do any events. And then after that, we slow rolled it open. We're constantly reinventing what it looks like to be in an event atmosphere by, while keeping everyone safe, while keeping everyone healthy, while making sure that we're actively engaging. It's not easy to do security when everybody's wearing a mask. And that's, acceptable now. So we had to reinvent how we do events. How do you greet people and have enthusiasm when they can't see you smiling?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point.
So we kind of had to reinvent how we were going to interact with our guests and how we were going to provide them with an exceptional experience and how we were going to keep the venue safe. So that all became our big focus, and we were constantly reinventing, constantly trying to figure out how do we do this while also honoring, everyone's different levels of, concern. So we wanted to make sure we were honoring that and not, overstepping anything. So, and then every client had their own protocols as well. Some clients required vaccinations, some clients required masks, some clients were like, whatever, I don't know what's talking about the pandemic. And so we kind of had to make so it's the events world. Everybody's a little bit different. So, so we had to kind of roll with it.
Angela, I've heard a lot of clients complain lately about staffing and trying to hire people and trying to find the right people. Are you finding that in your industry as well, or is it not really affecting you as much?
So we are really fortunate. I've got an exceptional team, and they really, we call it our Titan family for a reason. We really are just a family. We lean on each other. We have been together for a while. And for 2 years, we struggled with staffing because I think, like with everyone, people were trying to juggle kids at home, working at home. I can't really get to an event anymore. People who used to be able to come to events now we're at home with kids and trying to figure out how we can still make an income. So we struggled with that for 2 years. This year, so far, we have been overstaffed for just about every event we've had.
That's great.
So far, I mean, knock on wood, we are just, we're doing really well. And we are getting our recruiters working extremely hard. She's really built a lot of relationships and, been doing a lot of outreach. We've got a lot of our employees are referring others into our company. And I think, thankfully, the reputation has helped that people want to come work with us. So
that's really nice. And obviously, I obviously don't offer a lot of work from home jobs. So it's a hands-on in the venue or at the location.
Yeah, they have to be there. Even for our office staff, we do try to give a little bit of flexibility with that, but even our office staff really has to be present. And the reason is because we're doing so much when it comes to employee data. I don't want somebody working from home inputting employee data and payroll information, and not that we don't trust them, but we want to make sure that it's a sanitized environment where we can make sure that, there's not details leaving our office. So that's really important. We do a lot of all of our employees are W-2 employees. We don't do contractors. So,
Mhm.
that makes a big difference. And when you have that many employees to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about the podcast, because I know that a pretty powerful podcast is all about celebrating women. So why that focus for the podcast?
So, it started during the pandemic when my business was shut down, actually. So after a few weeks of, digging ditches in my yard, renovating my kitchen, doing all the home things that everybody else was doing,
Right.
gardening, and I'm like, okay, I've got to use my brain or it might actually not be useful anymore. So I started looking at opportunities to, do something that would engage, that I can engage with. And so I found this coaching, these coaches, it was called Eureka. So I found this company called Eureka, and they had just been part of the Facebook grants that had been awarded. So the people who got a Facebook grant had also been, and the reason I got in touch with them is because my mother sends me this thing saying, "Hey, you need to sign up for this Facebook grant. They're giving $500 away." And I'm like, "Mom, like, we're running a whole business. Like, $500 is not going to move the needle." She's like, my mom's famous words, "Every penny counts," Like,
Wait
Mom,
a second. But let's also remember that $500 is the amount of money you started the business with. So for
correct. Yes.
it's clearly moved the needle.
That's a great point. So I said, Mom, I don't know that $500 is going to, save or change anything. And I was like, but it is what it is. We're okay. We don't need it. And so of course she's like, well, you've got to at least look at it. So I went in and we didn't qualify. We were a little too big for what they were trying to do. But what they were saying is they said, we really need coaches. We need people to coach because everyone who gets this, or they said, we need people to review grant applications. So they said, if you can excuse me, I'm stumbling words, review our grant applications, that would be really helpful. And I'm like, well, that would be something fun. So I started reviewing these grant applications for all of these businesses. And it was really insightful to see how other people were starting their businesses, how they were running them, the resources that they had. And then that led into coaching. So they had asked me, hey, would you be interested in coaching some of these entrepreneurs that got the grants? And so I started coaching. So I would have a coaching circle of about 10 to 14 people.
Mhm.
And it was women and men. It was minority groups. So the first group was African American, and we were doing our coaching group for 12 weeks. And I was just amazed at how engaged and hungry these women were for knowledge and resources and connection. And the men were there, but you can tell they get this more often, and so the second coaching circle was Latino. And so it was the same exact thing. The women were really, really engaged. They would do all the homework I asked them to do. They would show up every class. They were really interested in growing their business because they really didn't have the opportunities that men have in their everyday lives to engage and to grow their business and to learn how to grow their business. And so I just thought there's really a need here. And, and then I start getting busy with my business again, and things start kind of picking up, and I had to step away from coaching. But it haunted me that this need needed to be addressed. And so over the past several months, or the next several months, I continue to run my business. And then, I was just kind of thinking about a podcast, and I belonged to the CEO group. And the CEO group, we were supporting one of our members who owned a music studio. And so he was walking us through the music studio, and we were all just kind of there to just kind of support him. And he shows us this podcast studio, and I'm like, yeah, I think a podcast for women would be really amazing. And I was like, I would love to be able to bring the conversation closer to women about success, owning success, being, climbing the corporate ladder, or just maximizing what you do every day to be exceptional. And it's really, it's not an accepted conversation enough in our circles. If I call them bus stop conversations. If you're at the bus stop and you're picking up your kids from the bus, you don't want to bring up, hey, by the way, I just got this awesome award, or I just got, a promotion. I got this raise, I'm got an awesome client. You don't bring that stuff up. They want to talk about, I always say that it's the parent conversations there, and it's just typically moms who the teacher is and bus driver is about to retire and this, that, and the other. And like, it's not acceptable to talk about, crushing it at work. And I'm like, that's not fair, because I don't know who my son's bus driver is. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Like,
No.
but I also say that's his world. Like, I don't need to know if the bus driver is about to retire. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Like, but
Right.
but also, like, I have this whole world, and I'm a single mom, and I need to be able to stay focused on work. And while I love my child immensely, I have a work world, and then I have my mom world, and it would be nice if the two could intersect and not have to be kept separately, kept separate. So I decided that I had mentioned during this CEO group kind of thing, when he said, "Oh, I've got this podcast studio." I said, "I'd love to have a podcast for women." And one of the guys said, "Oh, you should launch it on International Women's Day in March." Well, this was like late February. And I'm like, it's like 3 weeks from now. He said, "Yeah, well, I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it." And I love a good challenge. And so I said, I'm going to figure this out. And so I just kind of focused on getting this launched. And it was crazy, because as soon as I had put it on LinkedIn that I was going to do this, I got so many messages from men saying, "You need to interview this woman. She is amazing. She's doing great things." I got more messages from men than I did from women about how exceptional these women were, who weren't getting the attention and the recognition that they deserved. So I was really excited, because as soon as I started interviewing, and we launched it, we release one every single week on Tuesdays. It has just really become something where I am inspired by all the women that I'm talking to. And, now being able to do it on Zoom, I've been able to talk to incredible people like you, and like, other people who are not in Georgia. And so that has really helped. But
full disclosure, I was a recent guest on Angela's podcast. So I'll post a link to that episode, because it was a lot of fun.
Yes.
So Angela, why do you think it is that women are generally not as vocal about sharing their success and their accomplishments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what I have learned is that women by nature, right? So if they're here, I give you an example. If somebody has a job posting, right, and a woman looks at the job posting and she says, "I only meet 8 out of the 10 requirements. I can't apply for this," right? A man will look at it and say, "I've got 8 out of the 10 requirements. This is a shoot. I'm good. This is fine." And he will apply, and she will not. Women tend to kind of downplay their accomplishments, downplay that, because I think what we're so used to doing is giving our power away. And so we are accustomed to giving our power to other people in the room, right? It's the empathy gene. I don't know what it is, but it's some kind of, it's everyone else's success, right? Like, my success is because of our success. Whereas a man is more likely to say, "Yeah, we succeeded because of me," right? A woman will say, "We succeeded because of the team," right? And so they don't step into their power, and they let their power get taken away frequently. And it's not that they're doing it intentionally. We're just more concerned with community than self. Right. And so if you look at women, that's why we're better caregivers. That's why we are, we tend to be more nurturing, because we are community focused. Men are, kind of singularly, self-focused. And that's a generalization, obviously, that not everybody is the same, but I think that has been a big factor in it. And so women tend to not want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about other things outside of themselves. So teachers and bus drivers and, other people that have led to their success. And, when we become uncomfortable taking compliments, when somebody says, "Hey, I just saw on LinkedIn that you were on this great podcast," I'd say, "Oh yeah, Dara, she's so wonderful. I love her. She's, she's done amazing things, and nothing about me." Right. And so you immediately give the credit to somebody else. And I think that's our nature.
Interesting. So why do you think it's important to have women, in executive level positions?
So I'll give you another example, because I love examples and all the things I'm learning here. So I think we bring perspective that is different and unique based on our own experiences, based on our own lives, and then just based on who we are as women. one great example is I had been volunteering to help out with DECA. DECA had a national competition here in Atlanta.
And just for those people are not familiar with DECA, what's DECA?
Okay, so DECA is a kind of a young leaders, young entrepreneurs organization in high school. So I think they do it in middle school as well, but it's really a high school program that prepares people for being in leadership, executive, and entrepreneurial positions once they're out of school. And this national competition had high schoolers who were just brilliant. And so I was the entrepreneur judge, right? So they had to come up with this. They were given a scenario and they were told, okay, here's why, here's what your scenario is. You're going to have a franchise and, we're going to start franchising this business and we need your suggestions on what to teach the new franchisees, right? So the young men, these were high schoolers. So when it was always teams of two, and when it was two males, you would have typically two males would say, well, we need to focus on training, we need to focus on the operations, we need to focus on safety, right? Those were the three things that they were mostly suggesting. When it was two females, it was, we need to make sure that the branding is in alignment. We need to make sure marketing is done well. We need to make sure that the values of the company are explained well. And then when you would have two minorities, right? So African American, you would have Latino, you would have Indian, whatever the two minorities were, typically their response was more of, we need to supply mentorship. We need to make sure that we're interacting with our communities. They were more community and mentorship focused. And so each one of these teams, like when they gave me a response, their response was brilliant. It just wasn't comprehensive. And so when you would have, the teams that rated the highest for me were diverse teams. So a female and a male, or a minority and, or, whatever it was. So, when you have a mix of genders and race and backgrounds, you get a more comprehensive solution to whatever it is that you're deciding on. So that was a big factor for me. And that was one thing that was really a light bulb moment where I said, if more women are on boards, you have all these corporate boards and, women are known to actually make more money for shareholders than men, about 30% more. So when you have a company on the New York Stock Exchange that's publicly traded, a female in leadership will generally generate more money for shareholders than male-run companies. And the reason is because they just bring a different perspective and they're more community focused, right? They're focused on that shareholder value. They're focused on, creating a company that has longevity, that has a great foundation. Whereas men might be focused on the bottom line, fast sales, run fast and break things kind of mentality. Women are more like thinking long-term, thinking how will this impact, ABC down the line. So I that there's just a different perspective from women. And when you have women on board of directors or women on the executive level, they bring a different perspective into the boardroom that I think you can't get when you have an all-white male board. So
interesting, very interesting. I like the DECA example is very interesting because I think it kind of there's a lot of information there.
Well, and I think with DECA, what I loved about it is that you're getting it honest. These are kids at the end of the day. These are not people who are seasoned executives who have already been molded to think a certain way. They're getting it honest, right? This is their nature. And
it's very, very pure.
Yeah. And so that's what I loved about this is that, everything that I was getting from the DECA experience was very just real and relevant. So
I like that. Let's pivot a little bit because I know I asked you sort of who else you think I should meet, and I will tell you that you are the second person who has told me that I should get in contact with J.M. Ryerson. So tell me what's so spectacular because the universe is telling me that we need to make that connection.
Wait, J.M. Ryerson. I don't know that I know that name. Did I do that?
Then maybe apparently I've confused you with somebody else. Everybody has all these fantastic suggestions for me, and apparently I must have confused you with someone else.
That's okay. No worries.
It wasn't the second one. It was the first one that I made the note in the wrong place. So
No worries
So
at all.
let me ask you this way. So who is it that you look up to, or who is it that you use as a role model for your business, or something personal or professional?
I love people who are just tenacious at what they do. There's a few people that I feel have just this incredible tenacity. One of them is Stephanie Stuckey, who is, Stephanie is the CEO of Stuckey's Corporation, who her grandfather, I think it's her grandfather, great grandfather, founded Stuckey's Corporation, which was kind of that roadside stop, along the highway.
Yeah.
And over the years, it had been, as people were doing road trips all the time, this was a brand that was built and was really part of family traditions. And then it got sold to a bigger company. And just the bigger company just did not manage it well at all. And so her father brought it back, but he had experience in franchising. And so he was starting to franchise the concept. And then he wanted to kind of move on from the business. And so he wanted Stephanie to take over. Now, Stephanie was an attorney and a politician, not a business owner. And so, so she stepped away from what she was doing to run Stuckey's. And she has just done this amazing job of connecting the brand with the experience that people have with the brand. So she does these road trips. And I think everybody that I've talked to says the same thing. I would just want to go on a road trip with Stephanie Stuckey one day.
Really?
She's very real. She's very engaging. Her LinkedIn posts are amazing. You really feel connected to her personally, and you feel her passion for the brand and what she's trying to do. And in transparency, she was a guest on the show too, on my show. So, I really learned a lot about her. But there are certain people that I just look at and I just think to myself, wow, they are just, they're full of grit. They're full of tenacity. They're not going to back down because somebody tells them they can't do something. Those are the people that really inspire me. And then, of course, my mother.
I'll tell you that you inspire a lot of people because they look at you and say you have a tremendous amount of grit and tenacity, and you're not going to be told that you can't do something. So I think that that's you're going to see right back at you.
Well, I really appreciate that. And honestly, I get it from my mother. So she's, my mom was a single mom, grew up, she worked in a factory. She worked a couple different jobs as a waitress when I was growing up so that she could put food on the table. My dad left when I was 2. So, she taught me true independence, of nobody can tell you no. The only limiting factor is you, right? So if you believe you can't do something, you can't do it. And so, so her tenacity and grit is where it's come from with me, because there was a funny story. She's always taught me to do things myself. Don't ever rely on somebody to do something for you. Right. And so I've done a lot of the DIY home repairs myself. Well, I happened to be standing in my kitchen. I was making dinner one day or something, and she was over, and I had said something. I was like, oh yeah, this sink is wobbly. I've got to get this fixed. And she was like, why do you got to get it fixed? And I'm like, I said, I have to hire somebody to come over here and do it. And she's like, why would you hire somebody to come over and do that? And I'm like, because Mom, I'm running a business. I've got this thing going on. I've got a lot going on. I'm just busy. And she's like, you can do anything. She's like, it'll take you less time to fix it than to hire somebody to come over here and do. And I'm like, fine, I'll fix it. So the next day I just fixed it. and that's the kind of grit and tenacity from my mother, is that she's constantly like, just get it done. Stop making excuses why it's not done and just get it done.
Now, Angela, I got to call you out on something, because one of the things that you said earlier was that, women are too much of hey, so-and-so, we were great on the podcast. Oh, the host was so wonderful. So you did what we talked about, oh, well, I get it all from my mother. My mother is the source of everything.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. We're really bad at it.
Habits are hard to break.
We are really bad at this. I know.
I agree. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've really, really enjoyed getting to know you better and sharing all of your wisdom and advice with the listeners and the viewers. So tell people how they can find you.
You can check us out on prettypowerfulpodcast.com, and we're everywhere that podcasts are streamed, or you can go to our website at titanglobalenterprises.com and see all the cool things that we've been doing lately. So thank you so much, Dara.
You're welcome. This has been fantastic. And everybody definitely check out Angela because she's got some incredible experiences and incredible stories that she's sharing on the podcast. So Angela, thank you again for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.